money is making babies. You might have cash flow, but you won't have wealth. That's what he told me. And I looked at him like he had 3 heads because I had no idea what he was talking about. That's what I want to talk about in this episode of Leading Leaders. Stay tuned.
Think storytelling's just for bedtime? Nah, it's the secret sauce for business magic. Stuck in a rut with bland pitches and yawning clients? Enter Boost Your Business with Story Power. 6 weeks of epic storytelling training. It's like leveling up in a video game but for your career. Master the art of narrative and watch connections blossom like a viral TikTok. Simple, impactful, and game-changing. Ready to transform your biz vibes? Dive in now and make storytelling your superpower.
Subscribe now for access to our extensive media library of leadership lessons promoting faith, family, and freedom. Begin your personal growth plan at StoryPowerAcademy.com for leadership development and communication skills training.
I'm Loren Norris with Leading Leaders Podcast. I am not a millionaire. I'm not a billionaire. I'm not a highly wealthy person. If you were to look at the Forbes 5 billion, I am probably not on the list. Ironically, though, just based on the last few years, we're actually in like the top 10% of the world when it comes to income, which is really sad because that's still not enough week to week sometimes just to keep the lights on, literally. But there's something that you got to understand about wealth that I've spent 5 decades simply not knowing. There's a lot to be said for being able to go to the bank and say, hey, I want to buy a boat. I need to make a little withdrawal. I need to transfer the money to buy a house. And the down payment is just a breeze. 400,000, couple of million, who cares? I was listening to an interview recently, and the interview guest said, that kind of therapy is very expensive. It's like $25,000 a treatment, and you got to have at least 4 of them. And the host said, oh, so about $100,000. Yeah, not a problem. I wish I could say $100,000, not a problem. I'm not in that place yet. But here's what I have discovered along the way. Most people who fret, like I have most of my life, about money, do so thinking that money is the solution. The amount of money. If I just had 1 more comma in my bank deposits, if I just had 1 extra paycheck each month. Been working with a client who recently pointed out a great factor. They said, I used to work with a company, it was a multi-million-dollar company with a great leader. And what I found is that success hides dysfunction really well. Ooh, that's a harsh one. How many times have you heard? I know people with a lot of money and they're not happy. I've heard people say, I've heard John Maxwell say, I've heard him say face to face, sitting in the room with him around lunch, I've heard him say, look, money doesn't make you happy, it just gives you options. Sometimes those options will make you happy. And we ask him, what do you mean by that? What kind of options are you talking about? He said, look, I like to drive. I like to drive myself when I have the chance. But I don't always need to, and I do have a driver when that opportunity is there, but when I can drive myself, I do. And I came out one day to get in my car and realized I had a flat tire. I was already in a suit. I didn't want to change my own tire, and I picked up the phone and I called a ride, and my driver showed up and took me where I needed to go. He said, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, back in the days when I was pastoring a church, that was not an option. My option was go back in, change into some scrubby clothes, change my tire, take another shower, put my suit back on, and then I could go where I was supposed to go. But picking up the phone and calling somebody else to provide my ride and someone else to fix my flat, when I didn't have money, I didn't have those options. And maybe you haven't lived on the edge of just getting by, where you have to decide, is it car insurance or is it the cell phone bill? Is it car insurance, the cell phone bill, or the electric bill? If you've never lived there, that's a whole new level of stress. I watched my mom struggle through that for a long time. Do we put the tail light in when the tail light goes out? Because, you know, that bulb, it's $10. Well, but if I take the $10 out of the account now, do I even have the money to keep the lights on? But if I don't fix the tail light, do I get a ticket? And that ticket could be a couple of $100, and you know, then it's just compounding, right? See, there are people who live right there, right on the edge of how do I decide today which of the priorities of bills in my life am I going to take care of? Because I can't, based on cash flow, take care of all of them. Then there are people who live on the other side of that problem. I listened to a gentleman kind of share a little insight. I guess it was an insight. Maybe it was AI. Could have been completely made up. Here's what he said. He said a billionaire will fly an empty jet from one continent to another because an empty jet has no manifest. No people, no manifest. No manifest, no checkpoints, no customs, no tariffs, no taxes. So if you buy a $500,000 watch on a foreign continent, it's actually cheaper to put it on an empty jet and fly it home than it is to wear it home and have to pay customs and answer all the questions on it and then pay duty on it and then pay income taxes on it when you get it home. You can actually move it from one place to another and avoid all that if you have the option of hiring an empty jet. Well, that's one way to look at a problem. If I want to avoid the taxes, there are strategies. There are strategies for where to put your money in investments so that you don't have to pay as much in taxes. As was said by a presidential candidate to another presidential candidate during a debate, I don't cheat on my taxes. I just use every loophole that's made available to me, just like your donors do. And if you didn't like it, you spent years in Congress, you could have changed it, but you didn't. Well, that's a pretty indicative statement. But there's a truth here that I need you to understand. There's something to be said for the number of commas in your bank account, the amount of money that you have on hand and the amount of money you have access to. Whether that's the ability to get a loan or that's ability to go to the table and say, hey, I need some investors in this project, in this concept, in this cause. And Tony Robbins has raised billions, if not trillions of dollars over the course of his lifetime, some through investments, some through the multiple companies that he owns, some through the influence that he has, because there are people with big money who look at the good that Tony does in the world and they're like, I just want to put money into what you're doing. It's a feel-good return on investment. I'm not looking to get a paycheck back. I just know that what you're going to do with this is worthwhile. There's several foundations and things of that nature. And people with big money, they want to participate in those things. People with big money, they want to buy things that have a return on investment. As I started in my opening, I heard from a billionaire, if my money is not making babies, it's just being wasted. See, this is not about just the zeros at the end of your bank account. It's not about the number of commas in your bank account. It's about the relationship you have to money. Let me say that another way. It's about the relationship you have to the concept of wealth. Now, there are people who will say that the love of money is the root of all evil. That's the actual phrase. But it's not that money is evil. Money is a tool, kind of like leadership. When I was in the Congo, I remember being confronted with the idea of how do I express to these parliament leaders who predominantly speak French that leadership is influence, nothing more and nothing less. I walked to the front of the room with a knife and a spoon and a fork in my hand, and I said, which one is dangerous? My translator repeated my question. Of course, they all pointed to the knife, so I took the knife and I threw it on the ground, and they all looked at me. And they looked at the knife, and they looked at me, and they looked at the knife, and the knife did nothing. I said, well, obviously it's not that one. So which of these two, the spoon or the fork, is dangerous? Same response, well, it must be the fork if it's not the knife. So I threw it on the ground next to the knife, and guess what it did? Absolutely nothing. And so then I looked at them and I said, with this spoon, I could feed you breakfast or gouge your eyeballs out. And yet the spoon, and I threw it on the ground, is no more harmless than the knife or the fork. It's not about the tool, it's about who wields that tool. There are billionaires all over the world. There are billionaires who have great hearts, who do great things in the ways of medicine and help, feeding the homeless, building shelters, providing medical care. I've met them. I've worked alongside them. Then there are billionaires who want to use their money to influence world politics, to change the landscape of society and culture, to change ideologies. There's one particular billionaire, I won't say his name, but you would probably know it if you know anything about geopolitics, who honestly said, I get a lot of pleasure out of watching an economy collapse and knowing that I did it. Search the quote. You'll find out who I'm talking about. That's an exact quote from about 30 years ago. But his work is still being replicated today. His money is not making babies in that fashion, but it's definitely birthing ideas and worldviews and changing economies, changing societies around the world. That's his agenda. That's what he wants to invest in. It's his money. It's his outcome. That's the result he wants. Who's to say? The question is, are you in the place where you have money to make options available to do things that you believe are important? Are you in the place where money has you? Little statement for you here. This is from Tony Robbins, Money, Master the Game. It's on, let's see, what page number is that? Page 49. Beginning of a chapter on page 49. He says, quote, let's face it, we're not about to earn our way to wealth. That's a mistake millions of Americans make. We think that if we work harder, smarter, and longer, we'll achieve our financial dreams, but our paycheck alone, no matter how big, isn't the answer. Money, master the game. This is 7 simple steps to financial freedom, and the main thing he's talking about is investments. How do you make your money make babies? This one, success habits. Millionaire success habits. This is from Dean Graziosi, one of Tony Robbins' many business partners. He says, even if I could teach a group of people how to sell $20 bills for $10, some of them would let what's between their ears stop them from succeeding. Even with something so simple, they could still talk themselves out of success and not even realize they're self-sabotaging. Because so many times fear is the brake to our momentum, slowing us down so much that eventually we come to a complete stop. Look, I grew up in the world where what we thought about money was the rich get rich, the poor go broke, and it's the rich's fault. Who wants to be rich? I self-sabotaged myself over and over again. When I worked in Fortune 50 America and I was knocking on the door of 6 figures as a regular paycheck, I found ways to cut myself off at the knees to prevent me from crossing that barrier because I knew my family, my household would think differently of me if I crossed that barrier. If I made it into that 6-figure mark, those are rich people, that's a problem. Let me tell you something. Those are not the rich people causing the problem. There are some elitists. There are some multi-billionaires bordering on trillionaires. The ones who kind of fight for that top 5 slot in the world on a regular basis, that in my opinion have worldviews and ideologies that are simply harmful. They have an agenda about world population and control through vaccines and other things like that, that ideas that I don't agree with, but they have the money, they get to make the rules. They change politics, they change medical policies, they change global inheritances through taxation or confiscation, however you want to say that. But see, the real truth is billionaire, millionaire, wealthy. These are terms we throw around as a tool of measurement. But what it's really not measuring strictly is income, revenue, cash flow. It's really not even measuring true wealth. It's measuring the results for the things that you've invested your money in and the return that you've got from it. Some people inherit great wealth. Some people inherit seed money, and they have skill sets that make it great wealth. And some people inherit what I believe to be, what I'm discovering to be even more important. And that is the mindset that says, wealth is neither my objective nor my obstacle. I'm not put on this planet just to gain a lot of money. I'm not put on this planet to fight against a lot of money. Money, like a knife, a spoon, a fork, is just a tool. And how you deploy that tool, whether you feel like it's only here to pay the bills, to choose between the electric bill, the water bill, the cell phone bill, and the taillight in my car, if that's the only purpose of money, then it's just stress. It's just something else to worry about. It's a tool that keeps me in a bad health state because I spend more time worrying about it. If, on the other hand, money is a tool to build wealth, to be able to give things away, to do good for others, then again, it's just a tool. But if my attitude about money isn't right, if I don't have a good, healthy relationship to what wealth is capable of, then wealth is going to run from me. It will flee from you. There are other great books. I mean, these are just a few. Devon Franklin, Success, Commandments, Change Your Words, Change Your Life, the 10X Rule. There's some really simple principles in here. There's another one that I just recently got about scaling that says it's easier to 10X your life than it is to 2X. How is that possible? It's about mindset. It's about how you look at money. It's about how you look at the people around you, the ones who have money and the ones who don't. Should you pity the ones who don't or invest in them? That's a choice you're going to have to make, but you've got to change your mindset about money. How about this one? The 9-figure mindset. 9 figures. Goodness, I just got past the 6. What about 7 and 8? I got to go straight to 9-figure mindset? Yeah, because if you don't have the mindset to deal with wealth, wealth will avoid you. That sounds really weird, doesn't it? Yeah, but that's not the only book that makes that claim. I'm going to show you another one in a minute. But money, greed, and God. Did you know that even in religion there are people who have a horrible mindset about money? It's not about the amount of money they have in the bank. It's about the kind of mind they have about the money. That's a big problem. Think big, act bigger. This guy has moved billions of dollars, sold over 250 companies, I believe, moved more than $25 billion in assets. If you think small, you never take the risk. If you think small and you never take a risk, guess what your money can't do? It can't reproduce itself. How about this one? The step-to-step guide to lead children to financial freedom. What if there was a way to teach your kids to become millionaires? It's about the mindset. It's about what do you think about money? But let me tell you the biggest challenge with all of that. It's not just what you think about money. It's also how often. It's not just what you think about money. It's also how often. See, those things that you focus on, you tend to get more of. And if you think about money as a problem, you're going to have more problems. If you think about money as an answer, you might not necessarily have an answer, but you're definitely going to find more problems along the way because money isn't the solution. As my friend Bruce Carter says, money won't fix it. How do we know? Well, like he said, Dean Graziosi pointed out, if you could teach people to sell $20 bills for $10, they would still have a problem in their mind because they just don't have a good relationship to wealth. You've got to fix that. But before you can do any of that, you've got to fix other key relationships in your life. I've been listening to, and it's taken a while because the podcast is like almost 3 hours long, a neurophysiologist in an interview with Sean Ryan talking about all the ways that the brain is impacted by our lifestyles. And one of the things she points out is that one of the 14 indicators of Alzheimer's and mild cognitive impairment is a lack of relationships. She said, you know, you see people early on in Alzheimer's, and they'll sleep with their face toward the wall. They'll sit to eat with their face toward the wall. They'll turn their back on people that are around them, and partially because they're beginning to lose their memory, and so their relationship becomes harder when they can't remember somebody's name or how they know them or where they know them from. And I get that. But she goes one step further and says, that's not only a marker of the beginning of the problem, it's also an exacerbation of the problem. It's kind of like when you say, well, I injured my knee, therefore I'm not going to run this week or walk this week, or I'm not going to the gym because my knee hurts. And so not going to the gym allows the knee maybe to recover a little bit, but it also allows the other muscles and the other joints to begin to atrophy. According to this neuroscientist, she says, understand that the nerves and the brain cells and the blood vessels and capillaries inside the brain that are responsible for cognitive thought rely on you to use them in order to stay healthy. Meaning, when you stop using that part of your brain that's necessary for relationships, that part of your brain begins to go to sleep and eventually it atrophies. Just like a limb if you stayed in your chair too long. Imagine mental bed sores, emotional, relational bed sores. A place where this irritation becomes infected and eventually just stops working. Blood flow doesn't go there. Imagine having gangrene of your relationships. It's kind of what she's talking about. That's my own terminology, not hers. But the idea that when you stop using it, you start losing it. Look, if your relationship to money is a mess, if your relationship to people is a mess, if your relationship to you is a mess, the stories in your life will prove that out. You will say and do and behave in ways that indicate this is a problem. And the problem will expand and exacerbate. And there are things in your life that you have to stop doing now and start doing differently. Being a billionaire isn't going to solve your problems. If you woke up tomorrow and you won the lottery and you had 4 extra commas in your bank account, money won't fix it. Until you change your mind about money, about the tools, about the resources, about the relationships around you that matter. I remember talking to a guy in Atlanta, Georgia, when my wife and I were there to speak for a marriage conference. He asked me for a few bucks. And I said, if I give you $1, what are you going to do with it? He said, probably go buy a taco or a hamburger. I said, if I give you 5, what would you do with it? He said, I'd probably buy 5 hamburgers because there are people at our homeless camp that haven't eaten in a couple of days. And I said, if I gave you 20, he said, I would definitely buy 20 burgers and take them all back to the camp because there are a lot of people who could use a good meal. And I said, if I gave you a handful of seeds, what would you do with them? He goes, well, I love to eat pumpkin seeds or even sunflower seeds. I love to eat seeds. I said, if you planted those seeds and waited, you think you'd have a different result than if you eat the seed? I hope you see that metaphor as clearly as it struck me when those words came out of my mouth. How often do we, from a financial standpoint, from an emotional and relational standpoint, how often do we eat the seeds? We don't plant them. We don't wait for the harvest. We don't wait for the 6 seeds in that apple to become a tree that produces 50 apples or 5,000 apples over its lifetime. We eat the seeds and then wonder why we're still hungry. Sometimes the hardest thing about money is you've got to step back and go, I'm not going to spend it. I'm going to wait and invest it. I'm going to plant it and let it bear fruit. I'm going to let it do something else. And in our relationships, it's the same problem. If you have starving relationships, if your business relationships, your personal relationships look like your bank account, there's a reason. Because you've got to be a better person. You've got to become someone different to take your life to the next level. And I'm going to say this as an absolute truth. It doesn't matter if you've got 1, 2, or 15 commas in your bank account right now. If you're not the kind of person people want to stay around, that money will flee from you. Just look it up. Maybe your leadership Bible isn't as well worn as mine. This one's had a rough life. The law of intuition. From John Maxwell's Leadership Bible. He says, do you ever feel as though you need a therapist, then Psalm 37 is for you. David writes as a counselor, providing wise steps to take as you face crisis decisions. Whenever you feel the pressure of competition in the market, the compulsion to perform, or to compare your lot with other leaders, pause and remember these words. David brings eternal perspective and long-term vision that prevents mistakes and short-term decisions. Trust in the Lord and do good. Do what's right despite what others do. Cultivate faithfulness and don't move too quickly. Don't rush anything. Prioritize God and His values. He will reward and satisfy you in the end. Commit your plans to Him and trust Him. The results are in His hands. Be quiet and patient. Perspective comes when we grow still and think. Don't fret or compare. Such anxiety gives bad motivation. Refuse to get angry at your competition. Anger does not bring the results you desire. Put your hope in the Lord. Ultimately, He will guide you and use your decision. Listen, there are a whole lot of people out there who feel like if I can just earn the next paycheck, if I can find a way to hustle a little more, if I can put in a little more effort, do a little more something. The doing is not the end game. The doing is not the solution to the problem. More hustle, more manipulation, more sales closes. Eventually those things build your business, but they won't build your business until you build you. Ask me how I know. If you want to reach that status of wealth in your life, however many commas that represents to you, is it 6? Is it 9? How many commas do you need in your life before you're going to be happy? The answer is, it doesn't matter if there's 1 or there's 9. Until you're happy with you. Until you can look in the mirror and go, I kind of like you. Until the story that you tell in the mirror is consistent with the story you tell in the media, wealth is going to elude you. You've got to get that story right. You've got to be honest with yourself. You've got to improve yourself. You've got to build on those relationships and never stop doing it. Relationship building, it's like exercise. There's never a time to quit, and it's always too late to start. So start now. I'm Loren Norris with Leading Leaders Podcast for Tell It Like It Is TV. Have a blessed day. There is a retreat coming up that I want you to know about. It's called the Story Power Academy Retreat. This Story Power Retreat is about focusing on your communication skills, taking them to the next level. Discover, develop, draft, deploy, and deliver some of the best stories you've ever learned. You're going to listen, create, connect, relax, and reflect around this beautiful lake scene in Granbury, Texas. It's a chance to rejuvenate and refresh and start over with some of the best training you can possibly imagine around storytelling, leadership, and communication. Join us. Get away.
Subscribe now for access to our extensive media library of leadership lessons promoting faith, family, and freedom. Begin your personal growth plan at StoryPowerAcademy.com for leadership.